We discussed the principle of why is it necessary to say, why we say that it should affect the creation. But it doesn't, because the knowledge is at a higher level than the creation itself. Now we'll start 3 lines from the bottom of page Kuf Nun Dalet. Likewise, just as we've said that the ideal does not compel that there should be a factual result of this knowledge in the creation. Similarly, after that the Nivroim came to be, so as we said yesterday, when the Nivroim came to be, that clearly represents the knowledge of this Nivroim. What came to be, the way the Nivroim were known in their source. And therefore the Nivroim should represent the way the source perceives the Nivroim. All leanings, all interests, all insights and comprehensions of the Nivroim should be reflective of their source. Because that's when they were created. That's when they create their whole spirit comes from. However, you say no, likewise, just as the knowledge of love does not compel the creation. Similarly, after the Nivroim came to be, that knowledge from above does not compel, does not have an effect on the choice of the Nivroim. How the Nivroim choose to live, how the Nivroim choose to behave. The implication over here is that one may think, okay, there are two aspects in terms of affecting the choice of the Nivroim. One is that the Nivro is not really an independent presence. So he has no choice but to behave the way he was allowed to behave. That's not all he is. But this is not the implication here. The principle that this idea does not affect the choices of the Nivro, of the direction that the Nivro goes, is not due to the fact that the Nivro is, as you would call, a half-mass creation. It is dependent on his creator to be and to be aware of what the creator allows him to be aware of. That is not the point. We do say that the idea does not compel, does not define the Bechira, the choice of the Nivro. And we'll explain what's the principle behind it, but not to imply that the Nivro is not a full-fledged creature. And this is what we're going to discuss. So we say like this: the idea from above, from the source, does not define the Bechira, does not compel the Bechira. 2 lines from the bottom. Meaning to say, the Hagam, that although that he knows all actions of men, and all his pursuits and accomplishments. He knows all that koydem should also, before that the human being does it. This knowledge, as we already pointed out, is not merely a knowledge of projection, but is a factual knowledge. And as it says in the parentheses we're going to learn now, umishom, and from that knowledge, be'emes, in real truth, mokoir hakoyach lepilas adam. This is the source for the koyach, for the human action. The human being is able to act in all these ways that he's able to act because of the knowledge as it is by the Creator. This is what gives him the ability and the strength to do it. And the Rebbe says, this is the mocker of the Koyach, this is the source of that power. But then he qualifies that. Lord bechinas mocker, but not in a manner of a mocker of a source. This we never discussed. We learned this several times in these words. Lord bechinas mocker, not in a mocker manner. Not in a mocker manner. He says, since that ain't a together mocker, he's not in the category of a mocker. The principle of mocker as we already a little bit discussed this. And the illustration to understand the mocker versus not mocker, we used a river versus a wellspring. A spring, a wellspring, water.
Oh, versus wellspring.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we said as follows. It was not, I thought it would have been immediately recognized. So let me just as well elaborate on it. A wellspring is constantly perking water, but it's the definition of its presence is not the perk of the water. It is that afterwards this water is going to be accumulated into a reservoir or into a lake. The perk itself is insignificant. Everybody knows how a wellspring perks. You watch it, there's a little bubble coming up. This is not what its function is. Its function is that these bubbles accumulate into a larger area of water. And this is what actually serves the world. The perk itself is only a source, only where it's coming from. So, the principle of a mocker is, this perk is called a mocker, because this perk does not have its own practical function as such at this level. Eventually, it creates a functioning basic reservoir. But at the point of perking, it does not serve any practical use. This is called the mocker. The koyach shalamayla that provides for the human being's actions. So we call it the mocker of the koyach, the source of this koyach for human action is from the source from his creator. And the Rebbe right away qualifies that. We should not misunderstand and say that this is a mocker In other words, this is not an entity unto itself. Its whole function, its whole value and its significance is that it is a source for further development, not something on its own. This is REBBE, by the way, correct. And it says, no, not in a smoker, not in a mocking manner. Sheharei, since that any together mocker. He is not in that category of a mocker. Meaning it is not an insignificant element unto itself. It has profound significance on its own. And it is there for its own presence, not just as a mocker for further development. What then do we mean by what we said just a moment earlier, that this is the mocker of the Koyach al-Pios Odom? Rak except, Shemishom Shoshehu Amiti. From there, from that knowledge, is Shoshehu Amiti is its true root, which we discussed the first time we learned it, and we will just reiterate. Shoshehu Amiti means its true root, meaning this. Shoresh is a root. Now, every tree has a root. The root of the tree is buried deep down under the ground. We hardly see it. It certainly does not directly serve any kind of a functioning activity. Yet this whole tree is alive and well and pursues to develop because of this little root. This is called Shoshehu Amiti. This little root that buried into the ground, this is the source of the koyach for the entire tree. This is called a mocker. Its whole value and significance is to provide for the tree. It itself is an insignificant piece in terms of functioning. To use the piece of wood that the mocker contains is useless. But from there comes Shoshehu Amiti. It's the true source of the tree. Why is it called the true source? The tree is already a grown trunk. What's the true source? The true source is implied clearly, please understand. True source means if the tree is detached from this source, then it's a lifeless tree. It's not a real tree. A real tree is one that produces fruit. And to produce fruit, it has to have a chayis, a draw from the earth to give it the strength and to give it the impetus to produce fruit. You take the same tree as it is fully grown, detach it from the ground, it will cease to produce fruit. It's the same tree. Because to produce fruit, it has to be attached to its shoresh, to its source, to the life force, whence it comes from. It is the earth that actually inspires a tree to produce fruit. As we mentioned, that when Rebbe created the vegetation, he said, "Tache ha'aretz desha." Let the earth produce vegetation, not that vegetation should come out of nowhere. Rebbe should create vegetation independent of anything else, but that's not the way they were created. He said, "Tache ha'aretz desha." It's the earth that contains the spirit for vegetation. And the Rebbe said, let that spirit come forth, express itself. This is what's called Shorshu Hamiti. Its true Shorsh means this is what gives everything a real meaning of its being. The human being is able to act. As we already discussed, human being is able to act in all kinds of different ways, really in very versatile ways. The whole phenomenon of human action, you would think, he's able to act because he has such versatile limbs. His hands is able to move this way, and then to move this way, his fingers and so forth. This is not what enables a human being to act. What enables a human being to act is his sense of a limitless, his sense of a participant in the divine reality. As we discussed yesterday, the child running around, a human being also is a constantly pursuit of something that he had not yet seen. Because he's constantly, his primary awareness, the primary of reality is the source of his being rather than the being itself. The reason he's aware that the primary reality is the source, because the source of his being, this is the spirit that defines being. The simple mashal, so to speak, that we use to illustrate this principle on a very simple level, but everybody understands it. We say, you're a guest, you enter a wedding hall, and there is food laid out for all the guests. Everybody is welcome to partake of any food. There's one person who is actually a guest, an invited guest, partaking in this wedding. There's one, an intruder. He saw there is a food, but he comes in and to take advantage of the opportunity. They both can eat the same food. The one who is a guest has a basis for his presence there. He has a shoyresh, he has a sense of reality of his being there. Completely different experience than the one who is an intruder. He only has all he has is the food, but not the source of this food. The shoyresh, the reason for it. This is what it means, shorshu hamiti. The true shoyresh, the true enabler for human action, it's not the fact that he has a very versatile limb and is able to do things. It is because he has a source in the divine knowledge that gives him, so to speak, the authority and urging him to go and develop and do everything that he's able to do. Because thereby he's expressing, bringing out, revealing the divine source. This is what it means, shorshehu amiti. I hope, we learned this several times already. I hope it should be clear. It's a very, very significant principle. And this principle reverberates on every level of human activity. To daven, for example, all you need is to learn the alphabet and learn how come it's out, and know how to put the words together and you can read it. Davening and reading is not the same thing. Very different. Why not? You're saying the same words. Davening is when the reading is representing the source of the spirit for your davening. Reading means without us is spiritless. It's same words, but it's without that source. That's not called that. That's called reading. This reflects itself on many different aspects of human activity. Okay, now we are at the bottom of page Kufnun Dalet. We're going into page Kufnun Hey. What we said just now is that there's a divine knowledge of all human activity. This we discussed the last few days. All human activity is inspired and engendered by the divine knowledge of this activity. Just like we now discussed in the guests and so forth. This is the root. Shoshu Amiti, this is its true root. Its true root means this is what gives significant meaning, life force to human activity. Without that, he is just an action rather than doing the real thing. Like I said, he's a reader rather than a davener or a learner. This knowledge, the divine knowledge of human activity, this is what gives human activity its fullest significance. This is what makes human reading davening. And it makes it learning. You're learning Torah, you're learning, you're not reading words. Learning means that it's, davening means that you're experiencing spiritually what you're saying. Learning means that you're experiencing intellectually what you're learning. You're not just learning saying words. The ability for that and the provider for that is the divine knowledge prior that enables this reading. It's called Shorshe Amiti. It's true root, it's true source of spirit. It's important, I got into this, I want to elaborate a little bit. It's important to sense and recognize that when we take a seat into daven, we should not feel isolated, that I have to create my own spirit to daven. The davening is simply my obligation to daven, that's why I'm davening. Again, in emotional form, just as when a father watches a child davening, learning or reading, the child is reading words, but its father standing by and listening to him, word for word, and making comments and correcting and so forth, that is a sort of inspiration for the child to in the reading. It's a very simple, low-level illustration, but the principle is there. Very similar in a much deeper and greater sense. When we pick up a seat and daven, the Rebbe stands by and is watching us davening. And he collects every word. This inspiration, this davening is a direct connect. The spirit for davening is a divine presence, attention to your davening. This is not reading words. This is Shorshe Amiti. Because Hashem wants you to daven, this is why you have the spirit in davening.
in this formulation right now, we said because he wants it.
Who?
Because Hashem wants it.
Yeah.
Earlier or inside, it seems more like idea.
No. Idea, why is it idea? Because he wants it.
Okay.
The idea is that which expresses that which he wants. So this knowledge, I'm going to jump to the next page. This knowledge that Hashem knows of all human activity, which ultimately provides for the spirit for human activity. This is the koyach. Human activity is a living activity. This is not a robotic activity, it is a living activity expressing the source of life. This is the source of life that it's expressing is that Hashem knows of this activity and is paying attention to the activity. Every human activity is taking account, it's paying attention to by the divine interest. Every activity. This is why there is a reward that has its own punishment. The reward and punishment is not because you're a bad boy, you're a good boy. Reward and punishment is because you gave the Meibashn nachas ruach. You fulfilled a divine desire, or you violated it.
Can I?
I thought, yeah, just 1 second. I thought I would be brave and sit as is. I have to put on my little vest. I think that'll give me a little more respite.
Yeah, right.
Better, huh? Better. Not sure. No? Not sure. Kevin. We hope.
So everything is closed. He said, look,
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. That's a little cool.
Okay, so I'm glad that we got to this. Yes, Epsilon.
I would like to ask if I understand it correctly. Is the Rebbe is saying "Lo b'bchenes muker, lak shemesham shor shehu ameti." I understand that as a muker would mean like something is being created and now it's completely on its own. It doesn't have any shaykhs now to the muker. Shor shehu ameti means that this is his chayas. This is the shoyrish is his chayas. The chayas Udim is not from the flesh and bones. This is the spirit, Hashem's spirit in him. This is still his chayas. Is this correct?
I'm not catching what you're saying. We explained that Shosher Ho'amiti means, you probably may mean to say this. Shosher Ho'amiti means, like we said, a tree, a full-grown tree, produce fruit. What is the spirit behind the production of fruit from this tree? It's an apple tree. Every branch on this apple tree is an apple, the branch of an apple tree. It should produce fruit. Not so. This apple tree will not produce apple unless it is rooted into the ground. It is the ground that provides for the spirit and the chayus into the tree, that the tree should produce fruit. Otherwise, the tree is plain wood.
And what would be mocker?
Oh, that's a valid question. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Mocker in this sense means this. Mocker means the concept of a tree before it was created. The tree, as it stands on the ground, and it produces fruit. So the tree is, in a sense, the mocker for this fruit. But this is not the real shoirish for this fruit. It's the mocker. This is where if you want to have a fruit, you're going to have to go to the tree. But what enables the tree to produce fruit? That's a completely different thing. The tree as a resource of fruit, you could see it, you readily see it. But what is the shoyrash amita? What is the true force behind it that you don't see? That's buried deep down in the ground. That is, we could say, an infinite resource.
Rabbi PALTIEL?
Yeah, just 1 second. I thought of something we discussed yesterday. Just one moment. We discussed yesterday the phenomenon, the beauty of a child. And we said, a child runs around, and you think, hey, all this child is able to do is run around and throw the ball. Very big misunderstanding, very short-sighted view. This child, as you're looking at him, is this giant that will grow up after he had become a Rav and become a Gatzlich. That's the shoyrish, the spirit that enables a child to grow into that huge fruit-producing tree. Yes, Baruch, I'm sorry.
So from this mashal of the tree as a mocker, but not the shoyrish,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to say that the implication of that is shoyrish is much more distant from the reality that it ultimately comes from it than mocker? Mocker is much closer to the fruit. The tree is closer to the fruit. The root, although it's the real source, is totally distant from the fruit.
True.
Is that one implication?
Yes. Except I want to kind of comment, the word is not reality. The word is final functionality. The reality is in the shayrish, really. Because as we said,
but shayrish is very, very distant from that final reality.
that final function.
I'm sorry, that final function.
Reality, the final reality is enabled and inspired by this shayrish. As we said, you know how to read. But in order to daven, you have to be connected to the shayrish of this. Learning how to know how to read is not giving the spirit to daven, or to learn for that matter.
So is this is in connection with discussion of the idea that it's in a different realm. The shayrish is in a different realm.
That's right. That's what he says. It's not Bikini Smoker. It's Shorshu Hamiti. It's a true source, the true inspiration. It's like the root into the ground.
Right. Thank you.
That's it?
Sorry.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very, very much for those who were able to make it. I'm sorry I didn't post a reminder yesterday about the shir to be here.
And for tomorrow?
Can we
Same
do
thing.
it something
Same thing,
permanent?
okay.
Really?
Can we do it something permanent?
Let's just say the
Okay.
the regular, right?
Okay.
For now?
Yeah, I originally said it's probably going to go for a while because
Okay.
I'm still a little bit hampered. Mitzvah Shem, the Eibusher will restore my.
Exactly. Please
Well,
God.
Hashem, be able to learn. That's
Yes.
good.
Okay, so tomorrow we'll
Yes, yes.
Maybe you should restore everything. All right.
Amen. And the B'zamidas too.